Folks, we just had to wait for one more member to show up, so we appreciate your patience. Just a bit of housekeeping, if you don't mind. The New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the School District of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough, Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the TAP. Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind taking attendance?
Sure. Mr. Gilfillan, Ms. Ciccarelli, Ms. Clark,
Here.
Mr. Del Sandro, Ms. Kenny, Mr. Ryan, Mr. Smith, and Ms. Weber.
Yes, here.
5 present and accounted for. You have a quorum.
And then there were 5. If you're able to stand, if you could, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is missing, so it's virtual, over by Dr. LaSousa. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Peter, do you know what happened to the flag?
It must have been moved for the play and not put back.
Okay. You'll find it, though,
I
right?
will get it back.
Excellent. Well done. Okay, very good. So welcome, everybody. I do not have any opening comments, and I want to get right to it because I know Dr. LaSousa has a presentation that we're all anxious to see. So, Dr. LaSousa, I'm going to toss it right over to you.
All right, then I can start off with the presentation, and then we can, from there, go into the rest of the agenda. But you guys can venture on down to the audience seats, and Nick will get the projector set up. All right, thank you very much. So I'm going to kind of continue a discussion that we've been having for a few years now, and it was one that we were right in the midst of actually when the pandemic began back in the spring of 2020, but it has to do with school start times, specifically the time we begin the day at each of our schools, and then the schedules at each school, and whether or not they are meeting the needs of our students as well as they can. So, just to refresh everyone's memory from where we've been before, school start times are something that has been a prominent subject of discussion among a lot of leading organizations concerned with student health and well-being, including the National PTA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, National Sleep Foundation, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these organizations and many others that are not included on this slide all recommend that high schools in particular begin their school days later, ideally at about 8:30 a.m. That's typically the target mark for when a high school day should begin. And the reason for that, if I could try to distill it into 3 bullets, is that human beings have circadian rhythms. The circadian rhythms change over the course of one's life. And during puberty and adolescence, the natural physiological circadian rhythm of a human being shifts to a later period of time. And not only does it shift so that the release of melatonin and other hormones occurs later in the day, but that time of life is one in which there is a lot of growth happening in the brain, a lot of cognitive development and maturation. And so not only is the sleep cycle shifting later, but sleep is really important at that time of life. And so because the cycle of sleep shifts, and because adolescents need more sleep actually than adults do, early school start times have negative consequences on students and their health and their well-being. So some of the adverse outcomes associated with sleep deprivation among adolescents is diminished academic performance, diminished athletic performance, lower grades, difficulty with decision-making, more risk-taking because of difficulty with decision-making, and all kinds of other things, including depression and irritability and sadness and the like, which we've discussed here at length in various meetings. And so plenty of places across the United States have actually shifted their start times at the high school, middle school level, particularly the high school level. And what they find when they do that is that students sleep more. And I have that kind of in red there because there's a myth or a misconception that if a school district shifts its time to a later start for adolescents, that the students just stay up later and they wake up later and they sleep the same amount. But that's really been proven out to not be the case. It's proven out through the surveys that are done of students both before and after a change in time. And the study that I linked here is from the Seattle Public Schools, and they actually put fitness trackers and such on kids before the change and after the change so that they didn't even rely on surveys, but were just focused on the actual data that came from the trackers. So kids sleep more when the high school day begins later. And then some of those other negative outcomes that were on the previous slide begin to diminish and more positive outcomes take their place. And again, that's been shown to be the case in numerous places where they have changed the start time to a later point in time. So here in Chatham, of course, this is something that we have discussed quite a bit at board meetings, and we've shown slides like this when Lisa Lautarulo and Karen Leister were here earlier in the fall. We were looking at sleep patterns over time. We've administered surveys to students to track their sleep or find out how much they're sleeping over the past 5 or 6 years. And steadily what's been happening is that students are tending to sleep less and less. Our female students, as you know, we've shown this slide before the last few years. Our female students tend to sleep less than our male students, so the crunch or whatever is a little worse for them. And then if you look at the middle school versus the high school, what's interesting is that middle school, most of our middle schoolers actually sleep an appropriate amount, which is 8+ hours a night. Here you can see about 47% are at the 8 or plus hours a night, and then on top of that, another 31%. At the high school, though, that really drops off, so that only 18.6% of our high schoolers report sleeping enough in the most recent survey, and almost half of them report getting 6 or fewer hours of sleep a night. This is my Christmas slide to celebrate the season, but the green bars, and you can see the grade levels are at the bottom, 6 through 12, left to right. The green bars represent students, the percentage of students getting 8 or more hours of sleep per night. And you can see, I don't have a laser on this pointer, but in 6th and 7th grade, the majority of our students get enough sleep. The number really drops off between 7th and 8th grade, and that reflects probably when the onset of puberty and adolescence is really kicking in, because of course 6th, 7th, and 8th graders all start the day at the same time. They have a similar amount of homework and so forth. And then after 8th grade, if you keep tracking the green bars, the number just keeps dwindling to the point you get to 11th and 12th grade where only 15% of students are sleeping 8 hours. And conversely, obviously, the red bars represent 6 or fewer hours of sleep, and you can see that every year that number just keeps on rising once you get through grade 7 to the point where in grade 12, more than half of our seniors report getting 6 or fewer hours of sleep a night. So our current start times and current schedules really are kind of the reverse of what they should be from a physiological point of view. The high school begins the earliest, and then the middle school kicks in, and then we have our elementary schools starting after they do. And one of the reasons for that is the transportation setup that we have in place right now. Our routes in the morning are triple tiered, meaning a bus makes a run at the high school, then that same bus drops off the kids at the high school, goes and picks up kids for the middle school, then goes out again and gets kids for Lafayette or Southern. And so when that happens, what becomes really important is how much time is in between each start time, so that the routes have enough time to go get the students they have to get, drop them off, and then go back out to pick up the students. So right now in the morning, we have 15 minutes of time between CHS and CMS. And then at the end of the day, we have, or for the second run, or the third tier, if you will, we have 55 minutes in between the first start, 7:40 a.m. at CHS, and then the final start, which would be the pre-K through 3 level or Lafayette, 55 or 60 minutes, depending how you look at it. In the afternoon, we have 30 minutes between routes, and these are double-tiered, so they're not triple-tiered, and then another 25. So the afternoon actually is where we've had the most difficulty the past couple of years with routes. When we have a driver who calls out, there isn't coverage for that driver, and then we just have a domino effect where the students are brought home later and later. And on the back side of things, this is what our bus routes look like. So you can see the high school route there, all the H's, they pick up students, then they get the M's, then they go to the L's and the S's. So an alternative schedule that I'd like the board to consider and to discuss would be to change the start times to be the following, and they're highlighted there. So instead of beginning the high school day at 7:40 a.m., we would change the high school start to 8:20 a.m., 40-minute difference. We'd keep the middle school schedule about the same, in that right now it starts at 7:55, the middle school day. We'd move it to 8 a.m. And then Lafayette and pre-K, we'd bump back 15 or 20 minutes, respectively, to 8:55 a.m. This is just a possible new schedule. We'd continue to triple tier the routes in the morning and double tier the routes in the afternoon. Again, there are currently today 15 minutes of time between the middle school start and the high school start. We would expand that a bit to 20 minutes. There are about 55 minutes between the middle school and the elementary level now. We'd have the same. So the morning system would be roughly the same as it is now. The PM, we'd actually improve. So instead of a 30-minute differential between the middle school and the elementary schools like we have now, we'd have 50 minutes between the high school and the elementary schools, which should alleviate some of the pressure we have in the afternoon. So just a comparison, the top one is the current schedule and current bus tiers, and the possible new schedule is at the bottom, and you can see the difference and underline the green and the red to sort of compare and contrast the amount of time that the bus routes would have. Looking at it by school, this would be the difference. So you can see that the middle school doesn't change all that much, and Lafayette and pre-K are being bumped back 15 minutes at Lafayette, 20 minutes at pre-K. The high school is the one with the significant change. So some of the benefits to doing this, potentially, would be that our overall busing picture would improve slightly. It wouldn't be a panacea for all the busing challenges we have, but it would improve a little bit. We still would keep the structure in place that our older students, meaning high schoolers and middle schoolers, would be dismissed before our youngest students. All students obviously pass through our high school, and that's where the biggest benefit of this switch, if we were to make it, would be. And we would still be able to run athletics at the high school level because a 3 o'clock dismissal is not so impactful that we couldn't do what we do now, which is we release high school athletes a little early from the school day if they have to travel a distance for an away event. On the other hand, some of the downsides are that now CMS becomes the first school of the day to start. The first school of the day always has to have students arrive the earliest because there has to be enough time for the buses to drop those students off and then go out for their second run. We would have a later start at the K-5 level, which could mean that we would need more supervision or another resource for families. I've spoken with the Work-Family Connection. They have the ability to assist us like they always have. And we don't push the final bullet there is that we are not giving the same relief to the middle school students as we are to the high school students. But the middle school students at the current time really are not the ones who need the most relief. It's the high school students. Some other considerations in order to make this work, and this has been sort of a product of the pandemic, I think, we would have to reduce the length of the day a little bit at the high school and at the middle school. We would not change the pre-K to 5-day. So the PK 5-day is 6 hours, 30 minutes as of now. You can see the high school day and the middle school day, how long they are. We would move them down a little bit in order to make more room for the busing. So to get into the details on that, just a tiny bit. Current schedule's on the left, and the possible new schedule would be on the right. On the bottom, this is the high school schedule. You can see the period length for high school classes today is 57 minutes. If we were to move to this new schedule, one concept schedule would be this one. I'm not saying this would be the final one. We have to work out some details probably, but conceptually, if we move to this schedule, instead of having 57-minute periods, we'd have 55. We would retain the length of the science labs, which we run out of lunch right now. We have an AM lab and a PM lab, depending on when the science class a student takes is scheduled, whether it's in the afternoon or the morning. And then lunch, instead of being 56 minutes, would be 54 minutes. So we think, and we've spoken with high school folks, we think we can run a schedule effectively and not miss a beat by altering it slightly. And a few things that, just to point out there, what that means basically with shifting periods from 57 to 55 minutes is that every class meets 6 fewer minutes every 4 days. The cycle is 4 days. Classes meet 3 of every 4 days, so there'd be 6 fewer minutes. We think, though, in particular with the pandemic and the number of investments we've made in online resources and online classroom management materials, whether it's Google Classroom, Schoology, all the rest of it, we easily are delivering to students far more than 6 minutes of instruction virtually after the school day, as it is now. So we think we can handle that and that that's not disruptive. And that, more importantly, getting kids more sleep is far more beneficial than the 6 minutes every 4 days per class. At the middle school, we would consider taking this opportunity to try to streamline the schedule there. So on the left-hand side, I just put here a typical 6th grade schedule. So this is from the point of view of a 6th grade student. There are 7 blocks in the day plus a lunch in the middle. The middle school folks have been toying around with improvements that they think they can make to their schedule. And the one on the right, again, this is conceptual. It's not necessarily the final product, but something like this would be to move the periods from 49 minutes to 43, shorten lunch a little bit, but no longer drop a class. So specifically what that looks like is, if I'm a 6th grade student and I have mathematics period 1, I go to my mathematics class when the school day begins at 7:55. I do that for 2 days in a row. Then the next 2 days, my math class is no longer at 7:55 a.m. It drops down to about 8:40 a.m., I think. Do that for 2 days. Then the math class goes to 9:30 a.m. I do that for 2 days. And then on the 7th day, my math class, period 1 up there, would be at about 10:30. And then the 8th day, I don't have math at all. So my math class drops once every 8 days, and all of my classes work like that. The middle school is thinking that it would be an improvement if we moved instead of an 8-day rotation, a 4-day rotation, and not have any drops, so that if my math class is period 1, I'd have it 4 days in a row, and then I'd start all over again. And by doing that, we would maintain the number of physical minutes that classes meet, but we would no longer have a drop period. And we think that that might be better for students and a little bit less confusing. If we did that at both CMS and CHS, we'd have some other benefits. The first is that we'd better align the schedules so that we can share staff a little bit more easily. We don't share a ton of staff between the middle school and the high school, but we share some. And when we do share some, there are a lot of constraints because we have to align the schedules given the rotation so that a teacher can leave this building, for example, at 10:40 and make it to the classes at CMS that they need to teach. But both buildings have a rotation right now that make that complicated. This would improve that. The fourth bullet here also is important, I think, in that right now we know we have a very early lunch hour. High school students eat lunch, their hour for eating lunch anyway begins at 10:40. Sixth graders begin at 10:39. If we were to move to this proposal, all students would eat after 11 a.m., which is a little bit better for them. And then finally at the bottom there, we have a little more separation between Chatham Middle School and Chatham High School in terms of their start and end times. And that would help with traffic. If you've been on Lafayette Avenue around 2:45, you know what I mean by that. So that's kind of the proposal. I know that there are some folks who would prefer that we just shift the pre-K through 3 or grade 5 schedules to an earlier time, like we flip. We were talking about that a few years ago. If we wanted to consider that next year, the year after, at some other point, there are certain benefits, like the fact that you'd have younger kids who are in school earlier when they tend to be more alert. That's a good thing. We could further improve busing. That's a really good thing. But the biggest drawback may well be that then younger students would be getting home much before their older siblings. So their older siblings couldn't take care of them or greet them when they are arriving home. And to give you an idea what that would look like, the bottom is the current schedule. The top would be that type of idea if we were to consider this down the road. But you can see the younger students would end up getting out of school somewhere around 2:20 p.m., certainly earlier than 2:30 p.m., which is on the earlier side. So that would probably take a little bit more discussion and would be a bigger thing to pull off, most likely. So that's sort of the proposal in a nutshell. I'd like to continue to discuss this in upcoming board meetings and fine-tune some of the details, make confirmation about any type of supervision we would need to fill in the gaps, and then communicate the changes and get ahead of certainly the busing to the greatest extent we can over the course of the spring. And final message is just this isn't perfect, but I think if we were to move in this direction, it would be a better set of schedules for a much greater percentage of students than we currently are operating. Not perfect, but better. And that's it for now. I'm happy for you to come back up on the stage and start the meeting.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. We've been kind of bugging you for that presentation for a few years, and I know we got derailed a little bit with COVID. I would like to open it up to the board first for any questions or comments before I jump in. Go ahead, Michelle.
Is that working? I have a couple of things. So I'm going to start with, I think our community would benefit from a specialist in the area of sleep to come and present. I think for us to be reporting, although we have done our research and due diligence, I think it's important to hear from people who have had boots on the ground and have been studying this and can speak from their expertise why this is something that will benefit, especially our high school students. So I know other districts have done that. I think this would be a wise investment. I think possibly would it be worthwhile to do a survey specifically asking families who rely on older siblings to meet their younger siblings, and that is their child care arrangement, and what percentage are we talking about, so that we can make an informed decision about scheduling and giving the maximum impact to the majority. My other question is, when we shorten the day, and I don't remember the numbers exactly, but if the high school instructional hours go to, I think it said 6 hours, and I don't remember what it was. Whatever it was shortened by X amount of minutes, where an elementary school teacher's instructional time stays exactly the same. And I think we need to think long and hard about what we're asking from our teachers. So, you know, some teachers will be losing instructional time and gain prep time, and others will be working a different set of hours and still working the same amount of hours with instructional time. So I just want to know how that plays out in terms of our contractual agreement. So you don't have to answer. Those are just some of my questions that I have. I happen to be working currently in a district that made this shift this year, and it is not perfect. And it's certainly, we should be asking around to other districts that are doing this and what is working, what is not working, and maybe take a slow roll and real careful look as we move forward.
Yes, I glossed over the fact that in terms of the CBA, contractually, this would fall in line with our current contract. As you point out, right now, our teachers work varying lengths of work days, with the older students having the longest day, then the middle, and then the elementary grades. So I'm in discussions with the CEA about that sort of thing, and figuring out how to make sure that whatever we do would be smooth from the standpoint of the collective bargaining agreement. I do have a contact of a doctor who has made the rounds to discuss this, a New Jersey-based doctor. I think he lives down in Princeton, but I can look into getting him up here to describe the importance of this too.
Thank you.
Is there anything we have to consider in terms of the
Nick, could you turn on Brad's mic?
sorry. Is there anything we have to consider? Hello? Is there anything we have to consider in terms of the time that we have contractually hired the buses?
One of the reasons I'm speaking now is we ran this through the bus company for a student. They think that they can accommodate this as well as they accommodate the current structure. So it checks that box.
Good.
I don't really have too much to say unless, you know, I'd like to see the presentation and go through it in detail, but would definitely like to hear some of the opinions of medical professionals about, I mean, it's only 40 extra minutes of sleep, right? So, you know, it seems like a lot of gymnastics for 40 minutes of sleep. If it was an hour, maybe that would be different.
An hour would be better, but 40 minutes is better than 0.
Yes, true.
And I think the hour really speaks to, if we were going to go for the hour, we really would probably need to flip the elementary schedules. Yep.
I definitely have a few questions. If I could ask everybody that's not wearing a mask, if you could put a mask on. I don't know if we have extras. Well, I might have extras. If you could put a mask on, that'd be great. We'll wait. Thank you. Do you have a mask? Do you need one? Would you like to borrow one? Not borrow, but keep it. I stumped them. Pink, yellow, rainbow, what was your pleasure? Excellent. Thanks, Peter, for doing that. I appreciate that. Mike, we've been talking about this you've been talking about this for about a decade. The various boards have been talking about it for probably the last 5 years, and the last 3 years we've asked you to try and make this happen. Most notably because of the medical reasons you mentioned up front, the depression, the stress, and while this mostly impacts the high schoolers, it will impact everybody as they go through the system. While they might be in 4th grade now, in a blink they're going to be in high school, so it really benefits everybody. I mean, the game changer, the grades go up, great, lateness declines, there's less stress, car accidents decline. Folks may not remember, but when we were going to add new parking spots, it was a huge debate in the community, but what we found at that time was that the most number of fatal accidents amongst teenagers, not fender benders, fatal accidents, happen right after school, between 3 and 5 within a mile of their home. So unfortunately, at the high school level, these are life-altering types of, mistakes or accidents. So anything that will help us improve depression, whether it's, in any manner, depression, stress, anxiety. We're seeing more and more of our students that are struggling, kids that weren't even on our radar prior to this year or last year. So, it's amped up a little bit. So every bit that we can do, while not perfect, it's not an hour, but 40 minutes I think is worth the acrobatics to make that happen. I was listening to Michelle here for a moment. I don't think that we're going to be able to accomplish the younger grades initially, but something to look at as a phase 2. I don't want to jeopardize phase 1 for phase 2. And also you had mentioned that we've made some strides in virtual learning. I also don't want any loss of instruction to go on the backs of the students, after school. So that has to be made clear that somehow, instructionally, we have to figure out how to deliver it, and the default cannot be, we'll tack it on at the end of the day, we'll make it virtual, we'll do a Khan Academy, we'll do a video. That's not going to help anybody. So we got to figure out a way to do it without using some of those virtual tools.
I agree.
To make up the difference. But again, for me, those dozen medical, academies and experts is what is a game changer for me. Anything to reduce the stress, anxiety of our students. Does anybody else have any questions on this? So we're going to circle back. We're missing a few board members. We have a new board member coming on. So Michelle, do you mind taking a moment just to mention that? We're down a couple board members now, just the holidays and whatnot schedules, but so we will bring this topic up again and rehash it. And Mike, maybe you can email us a copy of the presentation so that if we have additional questions. Michelle, do you mind introducing the new board member? I know they're not here, but.
Yeah. Sure. We, in order to replace Sal Arnick's retirement from the board, resignation, we were really actually quite happy. We had 6 people express interest in the position, and 4 came forward and officially submitted to participate in the interview process. We had a wealth of experiences with all candidates with different things that they could bring forward in the interview process. The decision was very difficult. It was myself, Bradley Smith, Matt Gilfillan, and Lotta Kenny, because we are the representatives from the township. And after just much debate and conversation, we've decided the best fit to replace Sal Arnick right now would be Miss Susan Ross, and she has been living in Chatham since 2012. She has a wealth of experience in finance. She is currently a small business owner in a neighboring town. She has shown great strength in community leadership and volunteer experience at the Library of the Chathams, at various schools within the school districts of the Chathams, and we think she will be a great fit to our board for the next year. This position is until January 2023, so it would be a one-year position again. And again, we were delighted to be able to see people. In the past, we've had difficulty engaging people in the process and getting people to come to the table, and we were delighted with the candidates that we did have. The decision was difficult, and we had hoped to have the fingerprinting process done and be able to swear her in tonight, but do everything because of COVID is delayed. So she will be sworn in with the rest of the board members at the meeting on the 10th, right? Is it January 10th? So it will be the 4 borough and township existing board members, and the new board member will be sworn in on that date. So we welcome her, and she'll be at our next meeting, so.
That's great. It's awful nice to have people throw their hat in the ring and, get involved and get interested, and we're super lucky, both in the township and the borough. We've had some really great folks show some interest, and I hope they stick around, because a lot of us are getting long in the tooth and heading out soon, so please stay engaged in the process. There will be some more additional turnover. Peter, I'm sorry, what's the date of the next board meeting?
January 10th.
10th.
The second.
Don't we have to have it? I think we have to have it earlier than that. Isn't it the?
I already have the waiver with the county superintendent.
Oh, you got the waiver. Excellent. Okay. So January 10th. Sorry. January 10th. And thank you to the township members that did all those meet and greets and interviews and making a recommendation to the board. That's fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions on any of those? Mike, I do like the schedule for the middle school. I like that the kids meet every day. I think that drop schedule is a little bit better for the upper grades. I think that's a little much for the 6th graders, coming right in out of Lafayette. So I think having the class every single day will help them a little bit with time management, and gives them a chance to ramp up to that class schedule moving before they start dropping a class in high school. So I think that'll also be a positive, that shift in the middle school.
The only thing about the middle school is I think it looked like it went down 6 minutes at lunchtime. And I do think we are focusing on social emotional well-being of our students. For some of these kids, this might be the only time that they have to socialize with their peers. And 6 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, but it actually really is a lot when you're moving that many kids in and out of a cafeteria. And I don't know if there's a way to look at that differently, but I think 27 minutes is not a sufficient amount of time for middle schoolers to have their lunch.
Well, what happened with the middle school lunch was that it had been 25 minutes until a contract or two ago, and we lengthened the lunch period by 8 minutes to get to 33. And the intention was that we would be able to build in some recess time where kids could kind of get some energy out and get outside if the weather was decent. And what's happened is we just haven't been able to staff that. We don't have enough staff in the building, and with the shortages we've had even before the pandemic, we just couldn't make that happen. And so then having the additional time in the cafeteria has really backfired, because it's given kids more unstructured time when they're done eating, and they end up making some decisions that get them in hot water. So the middle school administration thinks that it would be better off for the total management and behavior of the students if we shrunk down the lunch just a tiny bit.
Okay, thank you.
And how easy is it to shift? Like, let's say you start September and, the middle school administration comes to you and says, you know what, I have a different idea. Now that we see it in practice, we think X or Y. Is it easy to shift, or do you have to wait an entire year, or the answer, it depends?
The answer is it probably depends, and it probably depends principally on the staffing arrangements that we have in place.
Okay.
So any kind of shared staff would be a potential problem. We share some staff between the middle school and the high school. We share some staff between the middle school and Lafayette. And then we have some staff in the form of paraprofessionals or others, and teaching staff even, that may work in the AM or the PM, or they have schedules that are set in such a way where if we disrupt the schedule, it could lead to potential problems.
Okay. I was just curious how nimble we could be. Waiting an entire year each time you want to do something can be frustrating. I didn't know if we can, mid-year, make some switches without impacting the students greatly.
I don't think that's impossible. The busing, it would be impossible probably.
No, I
to
kind of
do
meant
mid-year.
within, for example, if lunch needs to be 5 minutes longer or 3 minutes shorter, can those adjustments be made? If you're finding the kids need a little bit more time, outdoors, can you shift that in the nicer weather? where they can, blow off some steam and things like that. That's all. I just want to be as nimble as possible to most benefit the students. And this is budget neutral, correct?
Correct.
Essentially. Excellent. Okay, great. So more to follow. We'll keep, and if you could email that presentation to the full board, that would be great. If there's no additional questions, Mike, did you have anything else on your agenda?
Only
talk
other
about-
thing for me is just a status check on the schools and COVID. So as probably many people are aware, as predicted, COVID cases are rising in New Jersey with the holidays and the cold weather. We have had more cases since Thanksgiving than all of the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving combined. So it's been busy. I know that there are other districts that are either closing for periods of time or reducing the length of the day to eliminate the lunch period. We have no plans on doing either of those things. We really believe, I don't want to speak for everyone up here, but I believe, and I think everyone on the stage does, that it's critically important for kids to be in school and to be in a routine and to continue to learn. So we're doing the best we can with managing the positive cases that do come our way. Unfortunately, that still includes the quarantining of students if they're unvaccinated and are identified as a close contact, but we're working with the departments of health to do what we need to do to keep the schools up and open and running as normal as possible. And we'll keep doing that hopefully right through the break upcoming, and then knock wood, when we get into January, hopefully things will become a little bit more stable and we'll be on to better, sunnier pastures soon.
Have the increase in cases been spread out throughout the buildings, or is it mostly in the younger grade buildings?
It's been at all the schools.
Across the board, okay.
Mhm.
Oh, boy. Probably can anticipate that after the holidays as well, after the break. Okay. I agree, though, that we've always said that the stake in the ground is as much in-person learning as possible, however we, can accomplish that safely. Any other questions for Mike on any of those topics? No. You're good, Mr. Ryan? Okay, excellent. Peter, over to you for the administrator's report.
Sure, I just have two quick items. I feel like this is, the first one is kind of like out of Groundhog Day, but since the county certified the results on November 20th, which was after our last board meeting, I'll just announce it was official that in the borough, Ms. Chicarelli and Mr. Del Sandro won to continue terms, and in the township, it's both Ms. Clark and Ms. Kenny to continue on the board. And as stated, all four will be sworn in on January 10th. On the construction update, I'm very happy to report that the roofer has finished the work at the high school. The final inspection is tomorrow midday, and the contractor just has to finish the cleanup of materials that are on the old site of the special service building, and obviously continue with regrading the property that was disturbed.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
And the final inspection is?
Tomorrow midday.
And
And the solar panels have put back on and are back to operation
the cleanup should be done probably by
by the end of the week.
Oh, the end of the week,
Yeah.
okay, excellent. Excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Peter on any of those items? And we're still targeting the other roofing projects for 22, 20?
Yes, the project at the middle school that did not occur due to the shortage of materials is on target to start. The contractor will have clearance for, I believe it is Saturday, the 18th, which is the day after school, the last day of school.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Peter? Committee reports, just for the sake of time, personnel and curriculum have not met. We meet again on the next Monday, the 20th. Finance and, well, let me jump to Mr. Ryan first. Mike, has policy or planning met? Oh, could you do twice? Show off.
November 17th and December 8th. The meeting on the 17th, we discussed a out-of-district student placement here in Chatham. We agreed to accept that student. We had an update from Dr. LaSousa on the testing availability for students in the schools, and we discussed the volunteers' vaccination potential requirements. That's the subject of the executive session this evening, I believe. And we also clarified on policy 5116. Jill, you had mentioned that you needed some clarification on the length of time that we had to support a homeless student, and Dr. LaSousa reported that there is no length of time
Okay.
that we have to support that student, and that's reflected in the first reading of that policy this evening. And on the
Just
8th,
on the, sorry, if I
Yep.
could just stick to November 17th. The testing, the student testing, you mean COVID testing, correct?
yes,
Not additional academic testing?
COVID testing,
COVID
excuse me,
testing.
yes. We met also on the 8th. We discussed that same issue once again. We also discussed the rates of COVID in the schools. We had an update from Dr. LaSousa on that and some of his discussions with the Board of Health. We also discussed the holiday schedule to include Juneteenth as part of the holiday schedule for full-time 12-month employees, which we approved. And that's it.
That's it. Excellent. The Juneteenth mostly impacts teachers, correct? Because students are generally out of school by then.
12-month employees.
12-month employees, okay, sorry. Teachers are hopefully out by then as well. Excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Ryan or Dr. LaSousa on any of those? Excellent, very good. Mr. Gilfillan is not here. Peter, would you mind doing the finance report?
Not a problem. The Finance Committee met on both November 17th and December 6th. On the 17th, they discussed the summer projects that have now been completed, as I reported, and the potential referendum for the end of September 2022 or into 2023, and various projects that are being considered. On the 6th of December, they met again with two representatives of Perrette Samjian Architects to discuss the projects and try to get a validation for the cost increase of each project compared to when the referendum was being considered in 2020, before COVID led to the shutdown. The committee will still continue to discuss the referendum, and if now is a proper time to do it, because the dilemma is money is readily cheap to get, but the projects are very expensive to complete, and still have to worry about supply and contractor availability. So more to come.
Excellent, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? We can grill Matt on that at the next meeting as well. Perfect, thank you. Any liaison reports? I do. I actually would just want to remind folks about the Chatham Performing Arts Boosters. This Wednesday, Chatham High School, Chatham Middle School, they'll be performing all around town, the gazebo, Bicentennial Park, Memorial Park. This is all on the website. If you go to the Chatham Boosters, Performing Arts Boosters, so it's chatham-pab.org. The schedule's out there, but it starts at 5:30 at the gazebo. The 4th and 5th grade chorus will also be there at 7 p.m. Main Street has a few venues as well. And then closing up at between 7:30 and 8 down at Main Street as well by Scoops. So if you can make it out there, if you're out and about on Wednesday night, the rain date would be Thursday the 16th. So if you have time this Wednesday after dinner, please stop by any one of those venues to hear the students sing and perform. That would be great if you could support that. Any other reports? No. Excellent. Okay, I make a motion to pass the minutes of the November 15th, both the public and the executive session. Peter, do we have enough?
Yes, we have 5, and all 5 were in attendance.
Oh, excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We can't abstain, so there you go.
Duly noted, the minutes of the 11:15 public and executive session passed 5-0.
Excellent, thank you very much. So we have our first opportunity for public commentary. Hearing of the citizens during the public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about which issues are or are not topics scheduled for the current meeting. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers will be asked to limit their comments to a reasonable length of time. And again, just as a reminder, this is not a back and forth. If we can answer any questions, we'll do so at the end. But the floor is yours, and we're all ears.
Before you start, there is a sign-up sheet on the little table that is next to the microphone. If you want to be, in order to expedite the process, if somebody would move the table so everyone could sign in advance before they're speaking. And with the number, I'm just going to ask Ms. Weber what time limit she'd like to have for the speakers. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so just if they didn't hear, everyone will have approximately 3 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation.
Good evening, Nicole Lois, Chatham Township. I have a question for the board. Given that there are currently 8 Board of Ed members, I'd like to know how many members exactly constitutes a quorum, which is subject to open public meeting. To ask a different way, how many members, when they are meeting and conferring together, make a quorum, and how is that calculated? Thank you.
Just to set the record straight, the quorum is for a 9-member board is 5 board members. Anything 5 and more constitutes a board meeting that has to be publicized. That is set by the New Jersey School Boards Association.
Oh, go ahead. If you could just introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Good evening. My name is Marty Visitation. I'm a health and physical education teacher at Milton Avenue School and a member of the Chatham Education Association. I'm here tonight with my fellow association members to make a statement on behalf of the association to the board and superintendent. There has been a large amount of communication sent to staff and the community in regards to the idea that this school year is normal. We want to make sure that the board and superintendent are aware that is not quite the case. There are still sections of classrooms quarantining due to exposure to COVID. Teachers are still delivering virtual and hybrid instruction to students on a daily basis, especially as cases rise in the community. Masks, contact tracing, and social distancing are all still part of our everyday experience. Our secretaries are scrambling every day to get coverage for classes due to the lack of substitutes who are perhaps finding jobs in higher paying districts. Our paraprofessionals and teachers are covering those classes of colleagues that keep the school day running. Teachers are being asked to implement new programs in classrooms that are constantly changing. In February, a new preschool classroom will be added at Milton. In some ways, this year has presented even more challenges than the 2020-2021 school year because of the push to return to normalcy in a time where things are anything but normal.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Savori. I'm a full-time self-contained preschool teacher at Milton Avenue. I'm here tonight to publicly acknowledge the work of the paraprofessional staff who work in the self-contained classrooms at Milton, specifically in the preschool classrooms. These men and women are the backbones of these programs, and they cannot run effectively without them. While I know paraprofessionals all throughout the district have meaningful and difficult jobs, being in a self-contained program adds multiple responsibilities to their daily duties. Add COVID to that, and the health risks, as well as their responsibilities, become even greater. In a time when masks and social distancing are in place to keep everyone safe, this can present challenges for our students and therefore staff. Challenges that they have accepted and persevered through. COVID does not stay away simply because a child needs assistance with toileting or diapering, needs help eating, or needs hand-over-hand assistance to complete puzzles or hold a pencil. Our dedicated staff have not only assisted in these physical duties and more, but have provided the emotional support that the children desperately needed and will continue to need. Because of COVID, some of the 3-year-olds we received in August could have spent 1/3 to 1/2 of their lives quarantining at home, missing critical time developing the social and emotional skills of sharing, turn-taking, and managing emotions. Along with our paras, I'd like to thank our principal, Mr. Andriazza, the preschool case manager, Dr. Allison Moore, and Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, Dr. Sortino, for focusing so much attention on preschool this year. We feel your support, and we appreciate you staffing our classrooms in a way that allows us to educate each and every child every day. In conclusion, thank you for allowing me the time to publicly share with the board and the community the incredible staff we have educating our youngest students. I ask that you remember the self-contained staff. Next time their pay is negotiated, they are required to do more than paras in other classrooms. To say that they allow our programs to run effectively is an understatement. They allow for the highest quality of education that every other child in this district receives and deserves, and I thank them for their support, dedication, and commitment to the teachers and students they serve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lenore Paulin, and I am the principal secretary at Milton Avenue School and a member of Chatham Education Association. Despite the challenges this year that has been thrown our way, the staff of the schools in the district have remained committed to providing experiences that go above and beyond expectations, not just for our students, but for the community as well. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the great work our association members and Milton staff have been doing since the start of this school year. Back in October, an NJEA Pride grant provided funds to have a Halloween painted pumpkin walk in our community. Students from the High School National Arts Honor Society used their skills to paint pumpkins that would be placed around town to spark creativity for students and spark spirit within our community. 20 local businesses participated by hosting a painted pumpkin in their store windows. An NJEA Fast grant was used to have a Tea for Two giveaway for senior citizens after the high school's wonderful production of Sense and Sensibility. Usually, the Chatham Education Association holds a dinner for senior citizens after the fall play and the spring musical. Since we could not safely accommodate this, the association teamed up with the Drama Club Boosters to create this giveaway. This grant allowed for more members of the community to see the hard work our students in the cast, crew, and the staff who teaches them. On December 2nd, Katrina Keeshan and Tracy Kovashevsky from Chatham Middle School used an NJEA Fast grant to hold a family fun ceramic paint night for families in the district. Over 40 families participated in a paint night complete with a ceramic project, snacks, and a Toys for Tots drive. This allowed families to have a fun night out and experience some of the education students have access to when they take art classes in our district. During the month of October, MAS Sunshine Committee, along with Mr. De Niro, our security guard, held a breast cancer awareness drive. Milton staff raised over $1,800. We are 65 staff members at Milton Avenue. This $1,800 was then triple matched by Bank of America. Our staff is currently collecting unwrapped toys for the Valerie Fund. The toys will be sent to local hospitals for sick children to celebrate the holiday season. Spearheaded by the MAS PTO, Milton students and their families contributed to the food drive for the Chatham community, and we are now participating in our annual Hat and Mitten Tree. This is just a snippet of the community activities to date. We continue to be the little school that makes a big difference. We look forward to continuing our efforts to provide the best experiences possible for our students and their families, including our upcoming speaker for guardians and parents, K-5 students, on January 18th. With this goal in mind, we are also hoping to get some information as the discussion of upcoming changes in our schools continues. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Amy Kerr, and I'm a special education teacher and interventionist at Milton Avenue School, and I'm also a member of the Chatham Education Association. At a previous board meeting, it was mentioned that slides would be presented to help support the decision for earlier start dates in August. We're hoping you'll consider including the discussion of payroll and the New Jersey pension system, if possible, as part of your logistics. As CEA members, it has been our understanding that when we return in August, we are unable to receive our first paycheck until September 15th. It has been explained to us this is a pension issue, as the pension system does not recognize August as a start date. If this is not correct, perhaps one of the slides can offer clarification. As you may already know, many staff members hold summer jobs to help subsidize the unpaid summer months. As professionals with families, returning earlier in August would require staff to leave jobs earlier and lose those paychecks and not receive another one until September 15th. Many child care centers close the final week in August to clean and organize for the new school year, and staff would need to pay for additional care. Educators who live in the surrounding areas, such as Summit, New Providence, Morristown, and others, do not return as early as Chatham staff, making a potential need to pay for additional care. Again, this becomes a hardship when staff cannot be paid until September 15th. It has also been discussed at past board meetings that our start date is not mid-August, but late August. Please consider this. Staff is asked to return prior to students, either the week before or days before, depending on the week chosen. The likelihood that this push will continue to move to eventually be mid-August is possible, especially for staff return dates. Another concern that we're asking for clarification is, would teachers working towards tenure be affected? Tenure dates listed on a teacher's contract are stating tenure dates as days after the first day of school. It was noted that tenure dates are based on the pension system, and if the pension system does not recognize August as the start date, does this mean teachers would not gain their tenure until September when starting back to work in August? Wouldn't this create an increase to the 4 years plus 1 day if starting earlier? Of course, we are sad the best month of the summer will be shortened. Let's be honest, you can barely put your toes in the Jersey Shore waters until late July, but we're professionals and we accept and rise to the challenges of the changes that are always taking place. But we're simply asking for clarification and/or perhaps changes in our payroll system to help support staff needs during the academic year when working with students. Thank you for your time and consideration, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Hi, Kyle Roberts, Chatham Township. I just had a question on that I was hoping a policy chair could answer for me, and it's specific to a policy that I pulled off the website, specific to the board member election and appointment policy. And your policy states the election and appointment of Board of Ed members will be conducted in strict compliance with the law, And I'm specifically wondering about point 5, where under point 5 it says, election to fill a vacancy will be conducted at a public meeting. A roll call vote will be conducted on the entire list of candidates. And if there are 2 or more vacancies, each vacancy will be filled by a separate election. And I was just wondering if, because it didn't seem like you did a roll call or a public roll call at the meeting, and I wondered if you could also share the entire list of candidates.
We'll address everything at the end, Mrs. Roberts. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Jocelyn Cahoon from Madison, New Jersey, and just had a question for Dr. L'Souza. Actually, thank you for a very good presentation. I found that very interesting to see the sleep studies work. I was kind of curious if, as part of that presentation, you could potentially include, in the instances where this has been implemented and the schools have actually improved the sleep habits of the high school students, by starting, say, by 40 minutes later, does that mean they're only getting 40 minutes more sleep? Or if bedtimes tend to be like half hours or full hour type times, does that mean that the students are probably potentially getting an hour more sleep I doubt that they would be setting their clocks for exactly 40 minutes different. So I'm just curious, when there's a benefit, is it the benefit of only the incremental start time difference, or is in fact it potentially longer than that, so there's more of a benefit? Thank you.
Good evening. Dear board members, my name is Vanessa Uri. I'm a first-time speaker, many-year observer of the board meetings. My husband and I have lived in the borough for 11 years now. We moved here because we had children, before we had children, in anticipation of the good schools, walkability, train access, and community, as many families continue to do. Fast forward to 2021, and we currently have a second grader and 2 AM kindergartners at Milton Avenue School. I'm here tonight to encourage the board and superintendent to consider our family's experience at the elementary level. I'm not here to complain about decisions that have already been made, but to encourage a dialogue and timely action in regards to the current state of our elementary schools. With respect to full-day kindergarten, we had hoped and attentively followed the Board of Ed meetings and referendum a few years ago that Chatham would have a full-day kindergarten by the time our oldest started in 2019. As if we had won a small jackpot, our son was one of the few full-day kindergartners in fall of 2019. Then, as we all know, the pandemic started, and I quickly learned that I am not qualified to be a teacher. All of the full-day instruction was condensed into a few hours of screen-based learning. Many thanks to all the teachers, staff, and administration for getting the students back in person in the fall of 2020. Our son was in first grade last year, and his teacher was amazing, but because they were only half-day, there was still a large gap between in-person teaching and learning for students grappling with the basics of reading, writing, and math. At the end of last year, when school was still half-day, staffing was already difficult, and the future state of in-person learning was not clear, the board approved the elimination of a full-time librarian position. The presentation made at the board stated that enrollment was declining and they could not justify the full-time position. At this point, I was becoming very frustrated as a parent. We had accepted the position that there wasn't enough room or resources to have full-day kindergarten. However, that same argument doesn't seem to hold now that the district was saying that low enrollment could justify the elimination of a full-time librarian. Despite our frustration, we let it simmer and hoped for the best. While this school year has progressed very well for the most part, little issues have been popping up. I recently volunteered to reshelve books at the library and couldn't access the library because the librarian was substituting for my son's second grade classroom. There have been days where one class has had multiple substitute teachers, and they're pulling resources like the librarians to substitute. I understand that the board has approved the retirement of the current librarian as well. I wish her well, and I also understand that there's a new librarian hired. However, that position is still a shared resource between Milton and Washington Avenue schools. Milton has a wonderful children's library, but they need a dedicated librarian to curate the appropriate reading books by ability and teach the kids how to use the resources already available to them. If the board's concern was low enrollment, I would argue that a full-time librarian is an essential resource at the elementary level, regardless of enrollment. Chatham's elementary schools only capture these young children's minds for 3 to 4 years, after which they are all moved on to Lafayette. The library already exists, so it's not a matter of space. Moreover, the librarian can support the classroom teachers too. And in these times, more than ever, these kids need in-person attention and interaction. No more screens, says this mom. Where else can kids experience the independence of walking into a room filled with books and stories and find something and someone that speaks to them? When you consider the experience of our young children, please consider that they have had so much remote learning, limited in-person resources and social interactions, lack of stability, and yet they are eager to learn and be taught. Time is of the essence, and we won't get this time back. I ask the board to please consider thinking outside the box about options like job sharing, temporary classrooms, full-day kindergarten, reading and writing workshops, other in-person resources, and adding back a librarian at Milton to allow these young minds access to someone dedicated to helping them be young readers and future leaders. The future Chatham High School graduates are sitting in those seats right now, ready to absorb all that we can offer them. I look forward to attending future Board of Ed meetings and hearing how the board and administration is supporting our youngest learners. Thank you for your consideration.
Libby Hills and Rath, Chatham Borough. I was just wondering if you could tell us when or what date the decision was made to elect, I guess it was Susan Roth to be, or appoint Susan Roth to fill Sal Arnock's position. Thank you.
Mark Lois, Chatham Township. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about some of the development in town and how that's going to impact our schools. Specifically, there's a project now being done by Toll Brothers that was formerly the Dixie-Dale Christmas tree farm. A lot of residents are upset about it because of the way it looks mostly. That's 54 units on 30 acres developed on River Road. And that 54 acres, those 54 units on 30 acres will be about 2 units per acre. And that decision was made a long time ago, and those units are under construction now, and they're going up. And it is upsetting to look at because there's a lot of clear cut, and there's a lot of dirt there now, and it's not near its end. However, that is 2 units per acre, and those are traditional standard townhomes which will be paying property taxes and supporting our schools. There's a much larger project that's happening of 259 units, which is being funded by a pilot on, and that's a payment in lieu of taxes. That would be no property taxes paid, and there's some sort of formula between that can work out payments to the school potentially. But even worse, even more development is happening down on River Road in the borough. That 259 units I just discussed is not up. The demolition has been done. That's on Watchung and River and across from Dryers Lumber. People are familiar with that. But what's also been announced recently is that there will be further development on River Road. And I had said that Dixie-Dale, or the Enclave project, was 2 units per acre. That 259 unit project is multiples higher than 2 units per acre. As it could be as high as almost, I believe it's 50 units per acre there. And the borough has announced a plan to develop at a rate of up to 35 units per acre, the remainder of the 30 acres that they have on River Road, the entire zone. So my question about that development in our schools is rooted in an article in the School Leader, which is New Jersey School Board Association's quarterly magazine, about school finance and overview of pilot programs. And it says here, school districts should be educated about pilots, payment in lieu of taxes again, and be kept in the loop when negotiations are taking place. Only municipalities and counties are entitled to collect their prospective portions of pilot payments, specifically excluding schools. School districts can endeavor to get a seat at the table, to come to terms with local leaders, and to attempt to share in a portion of the payments. This is especially important if the new development generates children that will be enrolled in our schools. So again, 2 units per acre is upsetting to residents at Dixie-Dale. We're looking at 35 at 30 acres. And my questions are, how do you see this announced development affecting our schools? What have your liaisons reported about the redevelopment from the borough? What have your liaisons inquired about in the township? How does the school district, and more importantly, this board, plan to get a seat at the table for this 30 acres of high-density redevelopment? And then what conversations and meetings would be most beneficial to the district for planning purposes, demographic purposes, and to ensure the quality of our schools? And I'll just ask one more question. Mr. Daquila answered immediately when my wife asked the question earlier, and that answer was that a quorum is 5 out of 9. Her question was specifically, Mr. Daquila, what is a quorum when you have 8? Thank you for.
because we have a 9-member board. 5 of 8 is still a quorum.
Five or more.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Whitney. I'm here on behalf of another Chatham Education organization. I'm the grants chair for the Chatham Education Foundation. So I'm thrilled here to present a check today for $2,330 to the School District of the Chathams. It's for another grant, the District Choral Festival. This grant application was brought by teacher Ken Bryson with co-applicants Amber Blakovich and Dana Goodstein. The grant provides for a district choral festival with choral students at Lafayette, the middle school, and the high school. It will be the first ever district-wide choral festival in which the choirs in grades 4 through 8 are brought together for a day of learning, singing, and program development. The students will be taught for the day by legendary composer and musical artist Stacy V. Gibbs. He is a highly sought-after choral composer and arranger. Students will receive the music in advance to prepare for the festival. During the event, Mr. Gibbs will work with students on various musical pieces, on text expression, music history, and vocal technique. He will work with the schools both individually and as a whole unit. In addition to working together musically, they plan to incorporate some social emotional learning through various musical and non-musical team building activities. There will be a performance of the choral festival at the end, which will be recorded for all to see. This grant was funded in part by one of our endowments, the Ryan T. Ganley Memorial Endowment Fund, which is from the Metfiner family, which funds grants in the arts. We are very appreciative of the Metfiner family for remembering Ryan Ganley in this manner. Since the start of our fiscal year on July 1st, the Chatham Education Foundation has given nearly $65,000 to the district. We typically give about $100,000 in grants every year. We just had a very festive event yesterday, a Winter Wonderland, but we're without our big typical fundraisers due to COVID. Our annual fund is going on now if anyone would like to donate, and tomorrow is the last date for teacher tributes. If anyone would like to recognize a teacher with a donation, and the teacher receives a little treat too, and as well as a note from you. I'd like to thank all of our donors, both endowment and our annual fund donors, for giving to the Chatham Education Foundation and allowing us to enrich the district with these grants. Please check out our website at www.chathamedfoundation.org to see our donor list, including our endowment supporters, and learn more about the Chatham Education Foundation and what we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Libby Hilsenrath, Chatham Borough. Just a question. The two presentations that were given by, I think it was last year, Heather Rocco and Steve Mayer, ELA and Social Studies, both of them were entitled, they talked about teaching our kids social justice. And I was wondering if that's something that's required by the New Jersey State Learning Standards, or if that's something that we just chose to do. But they were both entitled Social Justice. Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions? No? Great. Okay, so we're going to close, all good, great dialogue. We're going to close the public commentary. I'm going to try and address those items that I can, and then ask Dr. LaSousa to chime in where appropriate. Mrs. Lewis, I think that question was answered. So 5 have to be present in order to take any action. The answer is 5. It's a 9-member board, so we need 5 people to take action. That's why committees meet with only 4 people, and then they bring their discussion to the full board for a vote. So we always need 5 people. That's why we had to wait for Mr. Smith, in fact, to start this meeting. Marty from the CMS, the gym teacher. Marty, you had said that we keep saying that this, things are normal, things are normal. I don't know that I've ever said things are normal. I don't think anybody on this table thinks things are normal. We don't want you to think that we're blind or oblivious to the fact that we're still in the middle of a pandemic and kind of piecing it together as best we can with the exceptional staff. This board, previous boards have been supportive and thankful and appreciative to the staff. I think we're all doing the best we can, but please don't walk out of this room thinking that we think things are normal. We're all wearing face masks, for God's sakes. That's not normal. Although, some people may like it for obvious reasons or other reasons, but this is not normal. Please don't think, please go back and tell your coworkers, nobody on this board thinks this is a normal year. We're trying to work together. We don't have the subs. We've been crying for subs. I've been begging, any college students. I've been begging relatives, in-laws, anybody that you know, please register to be a substitute. Please think about being a paraprofessional. Some districts call the paras teachers' aides. So we are not oblivious to the fact that the secretaries and the staff have just been juggling the best they can to fill spots when we don't have enough substitutes and the teachers need to be out or they're on a professional development day. So we're not oblivious to it. Mike and I talk about it minimally once a week, often more than that. Do we need to increase the sub pay? Do we need to change the structure of the paras? It's just not that simple. I know Mike has had additional conversations with the presidents of the union, and he can elaborate on that more, but it's not a simple equation, and we simply need more substitutes. We need more paras. So again, shake the trees. If you know of anybody, that would be great. Paying a little bit more will help. It's not going to solve all the problems, though. Thank you for calling out the exceptional work at the preschool and all of the teachers and the paraprofessionals. They are absolutely essential and critical. We couldn't do any of this without them. Earlier start date. So Amy asked a question about pensions and payroll. I know that we've talked about that before, even considering starting in August for the teachers. The teachers have been starting in August for the last few years anyway. We're still looking to push that back a little bit further. Mike or Peter, I don't know if one of you want to address the pension question.
I do not have all the information readily available now to address it. I do know that each teacher is always and will be paid 10 times.
20.
20 times, sorry, once every 10 months.
Yeah, I can say there are numerous districts that begin the year in August, including right here in Morris County. It does not impact tenure, and payroll is an easy issue to resolve. We don't need to pay folks on the 15th and 30th. The only reason we do is because that's what's specified in the contract. But we can easily accommodate, the needs of staff members if they begin the year a little bit early. And I don't think when we looked into the pension issue, as I said, other districts begin the year early. You can overcome any kind of concern over pension issues, we believe.
Well, we've started in August the last few years. I mean, not just other districts, we have. We're pushing it back a little bit, but we've been in August for the last several years.
Can you find out what the other districts are doing to troubleshoot the pension? Can you report back what the solution is?
Yes.
Instead of hypothesis?
We did do that when we talked about this a year ago, but I just don't recall the mechanics of the
Okay,
thing.
so at the next board meeting.
But it was doable. It was not a showstopper. And the teachers would not go without pay. The next item, Mrs. Roberts asked about a policy, and I might need Peter to help. I don't know, Mike, if you'd have the answer to that, but Peter, you do? Okay. Thank you.
Is my mic on? Okay. So we're going to follow the same process that we follow each time there's a vacancy on the board. The residents from the board that make up either the borough or the township where the vacancy has occurred conduct a candidate search, and they nominate a person to fill that position. Same process we went through with Ms. Chris D'Alessandro. They nominate that person to the full board. The full board votes on that person. So no one to date has been nominated or appointed at this point to Mr. Arnock's position. That has not happened yet. During the process, we will disclose, the policy says we'll disclose who the other candidates were, and the full board will vote on the candidate that's put forward from the members of the township that nominated the person to replace Mr. Arnott.
And that'll happen January 10th, correct? Yeah, our next board meeting is January 10th. Do we typically call out the list of the list of candidates that were
Yeah.
interviewed? I know we did in the borough, I mentioned it
We
during the
did
meeting.
it in the borough the last
Yeah.
time with Chris.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Mike, there was a question regarding sleep and the benefits. The young lady from Madison had a comment about that. I don't know if you had a...
I'd have to drill into the various studies that are out there for that, so I don't know the answer as to whether it's, I know that when a district has moved the start time by 60 minutes, let's say, it's not that the average student sleeps exactly 60 minutes more.
Right.
They typically go to bed a few minutes later, but they get up much later, and they end up having a net gain that's quite beneficial to them.
Right.
But I can't get in, I don't know the specifics of that off the top of my head, depending on which study we'd be talking about.
Okay, great. Vanessa, you had a lot. Full-day kindergarten, we're trying to get there. As I said, I don't know if you watched the last meeting, but we're trying to get there. We used to have none, then we had 2, then we had 3, then we have 4, so we're trying to get there. As enrollment goes down, that will certainly help. Hopefully, we're always thinking outside the box for solutions. Shared resources, we focus a lot on our K to 5. I mean, I don't want to say the most, but certainly a critical share. And because the enrollment has gone down, I don't know if you had an opportunity to watch the lengthy meeting last year on the librarian, and it might be helpful to watch that again. A lot of the reason that we were able to share resources is because the enrollment has dropped so much. We can't have staff that is not optimally scheduled. We can't have staff that, and not sitting around, but not scheduled in an optimal manner. So you can't go from 360 kids in a class to 210 or 50 and not have some impact on staff. We will continue to look at it, and we take, recommendations from the superintendent and the administration, and certainly at each building level to let us know what's working, what's not working. But we absolutely have to make sure our staff is optimally scheduled, not overburdened and not underburdened. There's a sweet spot in there. Mrs. Hilsenrath, date, what date? I believe it's January 10th. That is the date that the new board member will be appointed. Mr. Lois had a lot to say about development, and I'm going to have to try and send you, we talked about this dozens of meetings. I even have a presentation that I used to go through at every meeting. We have talked to the borough, who is going to, develop their plot sooner that would impact the school sooner. So we've been talking to the borough council for years now, and we've definitely been talking about a share of the pilot, the money, and we have been engaged with them on a regular basis. COVID obviously derailed both of our schedules, but they have been very open and very willing to share a portion of that pilot. We still have to circle back and meet with them and to understand what that exactly means. Mr. Ryan was kind of leading up some of those discussions, so we're working on numbers. I don't know if you want to add to that, but to say that we haven't had a seat at the table, we've been at the table for years in both the township and the borough. The Dixie-Dale property is a little bit different. I'm going to resurrect that presentation as to how many school-age children we think will, derive, or the experts think will derive from each of those programs. The one item I'd like to correct, and Mr. Heap is going to have my head for it again, but you said, they're going to pay their property tax and the school's going to get their share. Just to remind everybody, the school doesn't get a single dime from increased property taxes. The school budget is based on the previous year's budget, and while that's funded from property taxes, even if Amazon put a huge warehouse on Shepherd Colic that derived millions in taxes, our budget won't change, but the 2% from the previous year, not 2% of the taxable land in the towns, just 2% from the previous year. So it helps in that it may disperse the tax burden across more residents, so it helps the residents, but just to be clear, the school district budget will not see an additional dime from that, but it is helpful for the residents to disperse that out. So we're going to continue to work with the boroughs and the townships as these properties will impact. We're also going to stay in our lane and let the elected officials in the towns and the municipalities, do their job. But we have been at the table for years, and I'm going to resurrect that presentation. I'm going to send you the dates of some of those meetings. Cheryl, thank you, and Chatham Education Foundation, thank you for your support. It has just been incredible, and we can't do it without you. Mrs. Hilsenrath had a question about, Heather and Steve's presentations back in, one was in October, one was in, I think, November. I wrote the years down. That was in direct relation, that was a direct answer to, I don't know if anybody recalls, but the George Floyd incident happened. We weren't in school. We didn't have a great opportunity to really talk to the students about it. Some alumni students had come back and talked about things, inequities that they had felt in their curriculum, and that they weren't exposed enough to any social justice or any additional, equity in general. So Steve and Heather came in and did a presentation specifically to highlight that particular item. So it was total social justice, because that was the piece we were focusing on. Very similar to Mrs. Hilsenrath when you sued the district regarding the Islam and religion. We had Steve come in and talk specifically about religion. So those presentations were really targeted to answer a specific question and to address some of the concerns of some residents, but really most notably some of the alumni that had gone through the district and said that we weren't doing enough. And we were trying to point out where we hit the topics and where we can maybe improve on increasing visibility so that the students understand some of the curriculum. Mike, did you want to add anything to any of those?
The only thing I guess I'll also add is, because it came up in multiple comments, both from the teachers and from Ms. Uri about the Library and Media Center, we are experiencing a very serious and severe shortage of paraprofessional staff and substitute staff. And we've been working on it all year long. Ms. Grant here has been to Fishawak and downtown festivals. We've got signs up at all of our schools. We're trying to attract people that we can bring on board. But the labor market obviously is very, very tight. And when the labor market's tight, the labor goes to the places with the most generous compensation packages, and that's not us. We don't have a very generous compensation package for paraprofessionals, primarily because most other districts in the vicinity provide them with health benefits, and we employ them part-time and do not provide them with health benefits, which is a significant and massive cost if we were to try to move in that direction for all the paraprofessional staff. And substitute-wise, a number of other districts have started bidding up the daily rate for substitutes. And we're in a little bit of a bind, because if we kind of try to match those rates, then we'll have a migration from our paraprofessional staff into substitute staff. So we're in a bind, and that's impacted every single level of our schooling, every single school building, every single department. And it's caused us to have to pull teachers left and right and existing paraprofessional staff to cover vacancies that we have in the schools. And when COVID rates go up, the vacancies go up, because what happens is staff, if they have children who maybe are not of the age to be vaccinated yet, or whose daycare centers have to close down for a period of time, they end up needing to take time, and then we have an exacerbation of the problem. So it's a very real issue, and it's one that we're trying to fight our way through as best as we can, just like we did last year. I mentioned at the outset of the meeting that there was no plan to close schools down for a period of time, or to shift to remote instruction, or shorten the length of the day. The only thing that really would cause that, for me to initiate that, would be the inability to staff the building and supervise kids in the schools. And that's what happened last year when we went remote for the week after New Year's. I'm hoping that we don't face that kind of crisis again in the next 6 months, but it's certainly one of the biggest challenges that we have on our plates right now.
Do you anticipate it changing, or if COVID starts to, leave us? Do you think some of that staff will come back, or do you think we need to? Where I'm going to is back of the envelope numbers. If we needed to increase sub fees and also pay paras benefits and change the structure to be full time, that could cost $1 million or $1.5 million. That would take up essentially the entire increase in budget for a year. And right now we use the entire increase essentially for teacher salaries, contractually based, and also health benefits. It all pretty much goes to salary and benefits. So we can't do both, right? We have to contractually pay teachers and we have to pay benefits. We can't use the same $2 million to pay for paras, but is that something that could be put on a referendum or a second question if we decided we needed, $1 million to make this work? Because we are struggling, Mike. We are struggling with subs, we're struggling with paras. And I know we don't have the budget, but can we, is it something you can target to the residents, say, listen, here's our quandary, this is what we need, and it would have to be an increase in the operational budget, not a one-time?
Well, the technical answer to that would be yes. That is something you could entertain. I think that that's complicated and we'd have to, really talk that through, but the
Right.
technical answer would be yes.
I'm just trying to think of ways to, that's obviously not ideal. I mean, we're taxed as it is. We just don't have a way to generate that kind of revenue without cutting staff in other areas. There's just no way to come up with that kind of money without cutting headcount, which isn't ideal either. So, I mean, I'm just trying to explain the bind that we're in. Michelle?
Is there any discussion at the state level, since this is not unique to Chatham, this problem is it's across the country, it's not just here, about any state relief to, in terms of the COVID relief money? I mean, this is a direct impact of COVID. We're not struggling to the capacity that we are prior to the pandemic. So is there any advocacy at the state level to plead, to plead the case, because it does impact instruction, and it's Chatham and other districts that cannot get substitutes, cannot get paraprofessionals, and there is an impact. And it also does increase the stress of teachers, because teachers are feeling it. They don't want to be out. They know if they're out, they're impacting their colleagues. This is a ripple effect on so many ways, and kids are having multiple teachers throughout a day teaching, that are being pulled from different areas. Nothing about this is ideal. So I would hope that we could get some advocacy at the state level, whether it's from the superintendents who are feeling this, to go and say, in addition to X, Y, and Z, this here is another huge issue, and there is an impact.
I know the state is focused on the teacher shortage. I don't think they're as focused on, and the bus driver shortage, actually. I don't think they're as focused on paraprofessional/substitute shortages, though they have made certain adjustments to make substitutes, to enable substitutes to qualify for work in schools that they otherwise could, wouldn't have been able to do. You can use some of the ESSER funds for things like sub-costs, but many districts, including us, we are trying to target those resources towards mental health related matters and some of the HVAC type, issues that we have. And that doesn't solve the issue of the migration of one class of staff into another class.
Okay.
Any other questions? We're just going to have to keep at that one. We've got it. Something's going to break. Something's going to give there. I mean, it's impacting the teachers, the students. I mean, the secretaries probably spend all morning trying to scramble placing people. I mean, it's probably become incredibly stressful to plug in, and we're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul in some instances, moving staff around. So we are desperate if anybody knows subs or paras. So more to follow. We could pick it up again on Monday at curriculum and personnel. Any other comments or questions on any of those meaty topics? Mike, I'm going to ask this, Mike Ryan, I'm going to ask Dr. LaSousa to reach out to the borough again to get on their calendar, but I know they're about the pilot.
We had a couple of meetings canceled.
Yeah, I know a couple were, with COVID, I know they're, but they were very receptive and very, nobody wants to harm the school district. Nobody wants to harm the town. Everybody's rowing in the same direction. So we are, trying to work together to ensure that we maintain our services. Excellent. Okay, so we don't have any additional public comments, and there's another opportunity at the end of the meeting. If you feel inclined to ask another question, that would be great. I'm going to move on to the regular agenda. I'm going to move personnel, and Michelle, would you, oh,
Brad can move personnel, I can do.
curriculum, excellent,
Okay.
very good. Change in plan. Brad, would you mind moving personnel for us?
Sure. I'd like to move personnel agenda items A1 to A29 to vote.
I second.
We also have some on the addendum.
Yeah, I just want to note on the addendum, there's addition to item A3, addition to A5, and there's item number A30. And on A10, the location should be a share between Milton and Washington, not SBS.
On the regular agenda?
Yeah, on the regular agenda, item number A10, the location should be a share between Milton and Washington School.
So take SBS out.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay. And then
Oh, got it, okay.
So A1 to A29, the adjustment to A10, and the addition of action item 3, 5, and 30. Move to a vote.
Michelle seconded
I
it.
second.
I got it?
Excellent. Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions on any of these items? Again, the agendas are posted Friday afternoon, so if it appears that we go through them a little quickly, it's because we've read them already, other than any addendums that are added. No additional questions? No comments, Peter?
Sure. Agenda items A1 to 29 with the correction to A10, addendum item for 2, 3, and number 30. Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro? Yep. Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 5-0.
Excellent, thank you. Over to finance. Great, I'm going to move finance and facilities, items B1 through B14, and there's an additional item on the addendum, which is item 15.
Second.
And again, I just want to recognize the Chatham Education Foundation donation for $2,300 for the Choral Festival. That should be fantastic. Thank you very much. Improving the district as always. Any questions for Peter? Excellent. Go ahead, Peter.
Sure. Agenda items B1 to 14 and addendum B15. Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro? Yes. Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes,
Agenda items passed 5-0.
thanks. Michelle, would you move the curriculum items?
Yep. I move curriculum items C1 through 3 on the regular agenda, and that is it.
Excellent. Can't really ask too many questions on that. Go ahead, Peter.
Did I get a?
Oh, second, I second it, sorry.
Thank you. Agenda items C1 to 3. Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro? Yes. Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes,
Agenda items passed 5-0.
perfect, thank you. Mr. Ryan, for policy?
For policy, I'd like to move action item G1, first readings on the regular agenda.
And these are all first readings, right, Mike?
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions on any of those policies, other than what Mr. Ryan has already answered for us? Of course, you're going to ask him again. Excellent. Go ahead, Peter. Thank you.
All right. I think I heard Mr. Del Sandro do the second, so Ms. D1, Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda items passed 5-0.
Excellent. Thank you. So we now, in the portion of the meeting for board business, anybody have any topics? Michelle, you want to?
I know This is a long meeting, but I think it has to be said about the recent violence in schools and school shooting. And I think we need to constantly remind our students how to do anonymous reporting, what tools are available for our students. I think it's kind of like a refresher. You know, we do a dry run on, you know, our school, you know, when we close for bad weather to check that our phone system is working. I think as we've returned to school, I think our kids need a reminder that that is available to them. And, you know, we are in a mental health crisis in our country, and we need to continue to speak to our teachers and our students about what to be on the lookout for. Never be afraid to speak up. There will be someone to listen to you. It's okay if you might make a mistake in reporting. It's better than not saying something. And I think it's something that we need to continue to talk about. We cannot let these things become the norm. We cannot desensitize ourselves and our students from what's happening. And so I just, you know, we have systems in place on our computers that, you know, systems that run checks through securely and whatnot, but there are also ways for students and families and staff members to be able to identify and share information if they're aware of something. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Michelle. Anybody else have any other items? No, this is our last board meeting of the year. We do have an executive session right after this. No additional board items? No? Okay, excellent. We do have a second opportunity for public commentary. If you could just introduce yourself, that would be swell.
Yes, I was just talking about development in the, on River Road, and my specific question, which I wanted to just go back to and just say this, that the point of my questions and the point of this is really that I haven't heard an issue tonight that can't be benefited by additional funds. And there is an enormous squeeze on you, and I can imagine it's very difficult, as it is in any position of organization and authority. However, you have an opportunity, it seems to me, to take a little bit of your destiny in your hands by controlling what comes into you. And with these pilots. So again, that's payments in lieu of taxes. And I understand that the comments were that you've had a seat at the table for years, and I appreciate that. But we have a development that's been paid for, that is going to be paying a pilot, and we still don't know what the share for the school district is. That means that while we have a seat at the table for years, we don't have a determination. And it just seems that we could drive that determination, and here's why it's important. That pilot that was agreed to on the 259 units is at 10%. That's 10% of gross revenues to the borough. Your mix of that is undetermined and entirely in the borough's hands. That deal is done. Construction's underway. So